On the eve of our engagement, Daniel's first love came back. Without hesitation, he broke up with me. "Rachel, I could never love a stand-in," he said. "The moment she stands there, you've already lost." I didn't argue or cry. That night, I quietly packed my things and moved out of his house. He blocked my way, questioning me. "Don't you feel even a little emotional about this?" It wasn't until the necklace around my neck broke, spilling its contents, that I finally broke down, sobbing. He bent down to pick up the photo that had fallen out, only to see a man whose features bore a striking resemblance to his. Wiping away my tears, I said to him, "Because, Daniel, you're a stand-in too." When Daniel proposed to me, his first love, Phoebe, walked through the door. By coincidence, she was wearing a dress in the same color as mine. Even more coincidentally, she looked a little like me. She strode over, grabbed a wine glass from the table, and hurled it at Daniel. "Daniel, you've really outdone yourself. You claim to love me, yet you turn around and propose to another woman? And you even found a knockoff to disgust me on purpose? Are you insane? You said as long as I came back, you'd be waiting for me. Is this your idea of waiting?" Tears streaked down Phoebe's vibrant, fiery face as she shouted. Daniel didn't dodge the wine glass. It grazed his brow, leaving a bloody scratch. The bright red blood trickled down his face, strangely captivating. My chest tightened as my fingers curled inward. I watched him in silence. Daniel avoided my gaze, as if intentionally. He stood there, letting Phoebe vent her anger. Letting her destroy every romantic decoration in the room. When someone tried to step forward and stop her, Daniel, dazed for a moment, stopped them. "Let her," he said. "After all, I owe her." But in his eyes, there wasn't guilt, just pure, unrestrained affection. When Phoebe had smashed everything in sight, she ran out in tears. Silently, I counted in my heart. 1 second, 2 seconds. By the 3rd second, Daniel had already chased after her. The room was deathly quiet. Everyone's eyes turned toward me. Some looked at me with pity, some with glee, but most with derision. I sat on the sofa, saying nothing. Then, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. If Rachel had any sense, she'd step aside. She's just a stand-in. Now that Phoebe's back, does she even have a place anymore? Rachel's head over heels for Daniel. She'd cry over a mosquito bite on his face. Think she'll really let go? Didn't Daniel say once when he was drunk that if not for her face, he wouldn't even give her a second glance? She has no parents, no background. 5 years with Daniel, wasn't she just in it for the money? Break up? That's a joke. I bet $1,000 she won't. She'll definitely cling on and never let go. When Daniel returned, there was a bandage on his brow. I frowned slightly. Then my gaze dropped to his lips, where smudged lipstick was still visible. And to his hands, tightly clasped with Phoebe's. He led her over to me, his eyes conflicted but mostly resolved. "Rachel, I could never love a stand-in," he said. "Do you know? The moment she stands there, you've already lost." I quietly looked at his injured brow and asked, "Does it hurt?" The corners of my eyes were slightly red. He froze, then turned away, avoiding my concern as he sealed the fate of our relationship. "Rachel, you're strong and brave. You'll be fine without me. But Phoebe, she's fragile. She can't live without me. You've seen it. I only ever saw you as a substitute." I lifted my eyes slightly, calmly meeting his gaze. "So, you want to break up?" He held Phoebe closer, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Phoebe and I share over a decade of history, the most beautiful memories together. Now that Phoebe's back, no one else compares." I watched the deep affection in his eyes as he looked at someone else. His injured brow and eyes, on closer inspection, didn't seem so alike anymore. And the Daniel I once knew wouldn't kiss another woman. Wouldn't flaunt another woman in front of me. Wouldn't humiliate me like this. Pressing a hand to my chest, I felt a twinge of pain. "All right, let's break up," I said, standing up. "I wish you two happiness." "What do you mean?" Daniel frowned, as if he hadn't heard me right. "You're agreeing, just like that?" I nodded. "Isn't this the outcome you wanted?" He seemed certain I would throw a fit, that I'd cry and scream, proving I couldn't let him go. Still probing, he said, Rachel, stop wasting time on me. I'm not into these games of playing hard to get. I chuckled softly, sighing. Daniel, no matter how alike, he's not him, is he? Thinking I was comparing myself to Phoebe, he looked smug. To me, Phoebe is unique. She has my best love. I lowered my gaze. Once, I had been someone's unique. Afraid my tears might fall, I turned and walked toward the door. Daniel paused before calling out to me again. Rachel, you. I stopped in my tracks. What? He pursed his lips, as if hoping to see pain or sadness in my expression. But I remained calm from start to finish. Are you done? Phoebe interrupted tearfully. Daniel, are you reluctant to let go of this cheap knockoff? In the next moment, I heard Daniel laugh coldly. Jealous? Don't you know who I care about most? I averted my gaze and left without looking back. As the door shut behind me, someone asked. Rachel's keeping her composure. After 5 years, wasn't she madly in love with him? Breaking up so easily, she's probably cooking up some big drama, isn't she? I thought for a moment before turning back. Daniel's eyes lit up instantly, with a mocking edge to them. Rachel, don't make meaningless trouble. I cut him off, pulling off the ring he'd placed on my finger earlier and shoving it into his hand. Useless things don't belong to me. For a moment, he stood frozen, his lips moving wordlessly. I turned and left, blocking every way he could contact me. After all, he wasn't like him anymore. To me, he was no longer of any use. When I stepped outside, I received a taunting text from Phoebe. Rachel, you're just a stand-in. Don't try that pitiful retreat to advance act with Daniel. I stopped playing those games ages ago. Without a word, I blocked her number too. She didn't know, Daniel was just a stand-in for me as well. His features bore an uncanny resemblance to how I imagined Harlan would have looked. At first, I felt guilty about it. So whatever he wanted, I gave. I even feared his face would get hurt. That's why I carefully cared for him, treating him like someone else, trying to make up for my regrets. His friends didn't like me and gossiped about me behind my back. But I didn't care. If anything, I wished Daniel would treat me worse. That way, I wouldn't feel so guilty. One time, after picking him up drunk, I saw him clutching his phone, calling out Phoebe's name. He grabbed my chin and muttered, "She doesn't compare to you." That's when I realized he didn't love me either. Neither of us was any better than the other. But I envied him. He waited for the person he wanted. The person I wanted had been gone for years, leaving not even a body behind. I decided to go back and visit him. While packing, I accidentally knocked something off the table, a necklace with an old-fashioned circular pendant. Inside was a small photo of a serene girl leaning against a lazy-looking boy. 18 years old. It felt like yesterday. But 10 years had already passed. I tucked it away and wore it around my neck. At my parents' grave, I laid down flowers and said a few words. Then I moved to the grave next to theirs, my chest tightening. The name on the grave was Harlan's. It was one I had built for him. Because after his death, there could be no headstone, not if his family was to be safe. But I wasn't afraid. I didn't want to forget him, and I am the only one left in our family. I wish someone would take me away with them. That way, I can be reunited with them. I poured him a glass of wine and raised it in the air, making a silent toast. But when I spoke, my voice was choked with emotion. Harlan, I'm here. 1 year after another, it's already been 8 years since you left. I've kept my promise to you for 8 years. Isn't that impressive? I wiped away my tears, my fingers gently tracing the raised letters of his name on the gravestone. I've done so well, Harlan. Can you come back and just take a look at me? But all I heard in response was the distant sound of crickets chirping. I stayed at the old house for a few days. That night, I received a photo sent by Daniel's friend. Phoebe, looking like a delicate bird, was leaning against him. Daniel tilted her chin up, his pose intimate. It was obvious what would happen next. Then a voice message popped up, Daniel's teasing tone, Rachel? Who is she? There wasn't a single ripple in my heart. I calmly deleted all the contacts from Daniel's friends. Then, curled up on the couch, I sniffed and wiped my nose. Harlan. I miss you so much. Wait for me, okay? Once I take care of everything, I'll come back and stay with you. But when I returned, I didn't expect to see Daniel. He was leaning against my front door, holding half a cigarette in his hand, the tip flickering in the dark. Backlit, a shadow hung over his face. When he saw me, he stomped out the cigarette and took long strides toward me. You actually blocked me? But there was a slight smugness in his voice, like he thought I was jealous. I took 2 steps back, but he blocked me again. What are you running for? Do you think I'll bite you? I didn't know why he was here. I furrowed my brows. Daniel, we've broken up. You've been hiding somewhere crying, huh? He mocked, certain that I, who had loved him so much, wouldn't be able to let go so easily. You even deleted all their numbers. You've got quite the temper now, huh? Just as his hand reached for my face, I turned my head away. Maybe my resistance annoyed him, because he suddenly stepped forward and trapped me between him and the wall. It felt suffocating. I smiled quietly. Daniel, is it your hobby to chase after your exes? He froze for a moment, then frowned. Rachel, we were together for 5 years. How can you act so nonchalant after breaking up? I found it strange. Was he in pain after the breakup? You were so in love with my face, weren't you? Look, I'm hurt. How come you don't have a single reaction? Because, Daniel, you're not him anymore. Seeing I didn't answer, he grew a little angry. I've treated you well all these years, and this is the face you show me? What? I could have raised a dog and it would have been better. Treating me well means you couldn't even break up with me properly and instead bring someone in front of me to embarrass me? Revealing our engagement news on purpose, just to watch 2 women fight over you? I looked up at him and met his gaze, smiling faintly. Daniel, does Phoebe know you came to find me? He froze for a second. I took the opportunity to squat down and broke free from his grip. As I walked forward, his long arm blocked my way. His voice was cold. Rachel, every time you look at me, I get the feeling you're not seeing me, but someone else. Do you like my face, or do you like me? Yes, aside from his face, I never loved him. The person I loved was only Harlan. At 12, my mom remarried to Harlan's father. Harlan was a year older than me, with a clean and bright appearance. He looked like a typical handsome boy. When Mom and I first moved in with them, he smiled warmly in the sunlight, ruffling my hair. Welcome to our family, Rachel. I'll always protect you. Those were the happiest 3 years of my life. I had my parents and a brother. It was really, really wonderful. But fate loves to play tricks. My parents were killed when they came home from work late at night, the car was stolen. Later, the case was solved. It was a group of drug dealers who had fled abroad. And my parents would never come back. That was the darkest summer of our lives. Suddenly, we lost our 2 most important family members. After the funeral arrangements, Harlan seemed to age overnight. I was terrified then. I didn't know what to do. No one would take me in. And Harlan and I weren't even blood related, he had no reason to keep me. While I was worrying, Harlan opened my door. He wiped my tears, sat by my bed, and gently hugged me. Don't be afraid, I'm still here. I cried in his arms, my voice breaking. Brother, don't leave me. I won't leave you. And so, we began a life of relying on each other. Those days were incredibly hard. He forced himself from being a clean, young boy into a mature man. He worked tirelessly, taking on all kinds of dangerous jobs. I kept the light on at home every night, waiting for him. Sometimes, I stayed up late doing homework, only to fall asleep. When I woke up in the morning, he had already come home and was making breakfast. He waved at me. Come try this. I made something new. Eat more, you'll look prettier if you gain a little weight. It wasn't until then that I realized we had both slowly grown up. And when I looked at him, I felt a strange shyness and fluttering in my chest. I hid it well. He didn't know. In the last semester of senior year, he started focusing all his energy on the college entrance exams. After the exams, he got accepted to the police academy. The day we got the acceptance letter, we went to the cemetery to visit our parents. He was silent for a long time before pouring a glass of wine and drinking it quietly. I knew he had things he wanted to do. No one could stop him. I just held his hand, tears in my eyes, and told him that I would always be there. Our relationship began to change from that year in senior year. His college was in the provincial capital, a 4-hour train ride from our small town. Fearing I'd be scared to stay home alone, he called me every night. I would do my homework, and he would watch me. If I stretched and relaxed, he would chat with me for a while. Whenever he could, he would come back to see me. I would pick him up at the station, and we'd go grocery shopping, cook dinner, eat, watch TV, and take walks by the river. He'd tell me about their training, and I'd complain about the problems I couldn't solve. These simple and happy moments strung together the last year of my high school life. But I was greedy. I didn't want to just be his sister. On a breezy summer night, we were sitting on the couch watching TV when I turned and took his hand. "Harlan, can you not date anyone?" He looked down at my hand. That's when I noticed how hot his hand was, hotter than my heart. "I want to." I didn't finish my sentence, wanting to backtrack. I was afraid he would refuse, afraid he would tell me I was just his sister. But just as I tried to pull away, he grabbed my hand firmly. "Want to do what?" I pressed my lips together. He entwined our fingers, pulling me into his embrace. "Girls aren't supposed to confess first. I don't want to just be your sister anymore. Give me a chance to be your girlfriend, okay?" From then on, we were not just family. We were lovers. "Rachel, speak." Daniel raised his voice, pulling me back from my memories. He grabbed my shoulders with a force so strong it felt like he was trying to crush me. I looked at the scar on his brow, suddenly feeling so distant from him. I pulled away from his grip and spoke slowly. "Yes, Daniel, I don't love you. Your scar is ugly. You're ugly when you throw a tantrum. You're nothing like him anymore." Daniel seemed to have heard the biggest joke of his life. He froze for a moment, then twisted his lips. "Do you even know what you're saying?" I walked away, not wanting to argue with him. But he grabbed my wrist. "Rachel, make it clear. What do you mean by that?" I turned around slowly and smiled. "What you're saying, Daniel, is that when you used me as a substitute, I was using you as someone else's substitute too. Is that answer good enough for you?" He had just been furious, but now the corner of his mouth froze. I even felt his hand shaking slightly as he held mine. When I tried to pull my hand away, Phoebe suddenly appeared behind me and slapped me hard across the face. She put some strength into it. My face burned with pain. "Rachel, how shameless are you to seduce someone else's boyfriend?" Her eyes were full of disgust and malice. "You think just because you look a bit like me, you can take my place? You're just a poor imitation. I warn you, don't try to get your hands on him." Before she could finish, I slapped her back with all my strength. At the same time, I slapped Daniel too. "Control your woman, stop shouting at me." Phoebe, clearly stunned that I would hit her, stared at me wide-eyed, then screamed, "Rachel, I'm going to kill you." As she lunged at me, Daniel stepped in and grabbed her around the waist. Phoebe looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Daniel, what are you doing?" I stepped forward and squeezed her chin hard. She cursed at me in pain. I leaned in close, my eyes cold as ice. "Don't provoke me. You know I'm an orphan with no family. It might just end up being who kills who." "Daniel, aren't you going to do something?" she cried out to him. I glanced at Daniel. It seemed like he hadn't recovered from my words about substitutes. He just stared quietly at me, an expression I couldn't quite understand flickering in his eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. As I inserted the key into the lock, I heard Daniel's mocking voice. "Rachel, when have I ever ignored you and you didn't cling to me? Now you're using some lame excuse to try to distance yourself from me? Ask yourself, can you really do it?" I hesitated, then spoke up. "I can. I'm telling you, don't regret it. This time I'm not going to soften up for you." "Daniel, what are you trying to say? Do you like her now?" Phoebe's voice was trembling. I opened the door and entered, cutting off their argument. From that day on, I officially left Daniel's world. I stopped caring about anything that concerned him. I stopped picking him up from places. I stopped endlessly reminding him to take care of himself, especially his face. It's strange, but after I did that, his friends who hated me started texting and calling, trying to test my feelings. I hung up every time. Occasionally, I'd hear the sound of Daniel smashing a glass on the other end of the line. But I ignored it. After finishing up with work, I went to see Dr. James again. Have you been taking your medication regularly? I nodded obediently. Yes. Do you still have thoughts of self-harm? I instinctively clenched my fists and shook my head. No. I haven't hurt myself in a long time. After Harlan passed, I couldn't dream of him anymore. Later, when I was on the verge of breaking down, I used a knife to cut my arm. That day, in the dizziness from blood loss, I finally saw him. After confirming our relationship, Harlan and I had the happiest 2 years. That summer, after work, he would come pick me up from the office every night. We'd walk home hand in hand, slowly. Later, we both went to college in the same city. After dropping me off at school, he slipped a bank card into my hand, telling me not to be stingy with food, that I was getting too skinny. I didn't want it and pushed it back to him. I've grown up. I earned enough for tuition by tutoring and doing part-time jobs. The rest I can handle with my part-time work during breaks. I knew he was already struggling and didn't want to be a burden. But he wouldn't listen. His face hardened. What's with the politeness? I've been supporting you all these years. Have I ever complained about it being a burden? I shook my head. Listen to me. Take it. I make money in more ways than you. When I checked the ATM, there was a total of 100,000. It shocked me for quite a while. I messaged him, "Why are you giving me so much?" "Because I'm afraid you'll suffer. I'm afraid you won't be able to take care of yourself when I'm not around. I'm not sure if this will be enough for 4 years, but don't worry. Your brother can always make more. If it's not enough, just tell me." We were both busy, working hard to make money and grow up. Occasionally, I would visit him at school. I'd accompany him for training, have meals with him. It seemed like there was nothing dramatic between us, just the simple passing of time. I took everything in stride, secretly hoping we'd spend every year together. Harlan finished his sophomore year, and we went back to our hometown to visit my parents. That day, Harlan was unusually quiet, barely saying anything. He stood by the cliff, letting the wind blow for a long time. I knew he was about to go on a mission. He had always wanted to avenge my parents. When he came back that day, he hugged me and told me, "Live well, and grow strong." I held his hand tightly and said, "We'll grow together. I'll wait for you." "Don't wait." He ran his hand through my hair, his breath warm against my ear, his voice rough as he whispered, "Don't wait. We always have to prepare for the worst. If I don't come back, you need to live on for our family. We want you to be happy more than anyone, to look forward. Even if you find someone else, I won't blame you. I just want you to have someone by your side, someone who cares about you. Only by living is there hope." As we parted, I raised my hands, holding back tears, and told him, "I just want you to make it through the danger and come back safe." "I'll marry you when I come back," he promised. But after that mission, he never came back. 3 years later, I received the news that he had died in the line of duty. Harlan's comrade found me and said that he had successfully infiltrated the enemy's ranks. In the major international drug trafficking case, he detonated a bomb, taking himself and the criminals down with him. Before he left, he gave me a small diary, Harlan's. I opened it with tears in my eyes. "Rachel, everyone has a mission they must complete in their life. If luck is on my side, I'll come back first and marry you. You cry so much, don't cry your face off when that time comes. If I don't come back, please forgive my selfishness. Maybe this is the fate we're given. Remember, your brother loves you, and Harlan loves you, and we both want you to keep moving forward with our hope. Keep going." But here I am, all alone, and isn't that a kind of pain? Later, I couldn't hold on any longer, and shamelessly used Daniel as a substitute. Looking at that face, I found the courage to keep going, because I was afraid that, wherever Harlan was, he'd be disappointed that I didn't listen and move forward. But I should have known by now, no one can replace him. When I opened my eyes, the sunlight pouring through the window made my eyes sting. I wiped my face, still damp with tears, and tightened the necklace around my neck. Rachel, your current state honestly worries me. I shook my head. I'm fine. I broke up with him on my own, and I didn't even cry. Dr. James spoke gently. When a long-standing emotional anchor disappears suddenly, it's easy for problems to arise. As a doctor, I'm happy to see you detach from that unhealthy relationship. But I still suggest taking it slow. I touched the scar on my wrist, giving a shallow smile. Dr. James, you don't need to worry about me. I'm ready to start a new life. I lied. I had come back to donate my savings, sell the house, and lock myself in the past. To stay by my parents and Harlan's graves and just survive. Before I left, Dr. James stopped me. Don't force yourself. If you can't move forward, go at your own pace. You'll find a way out. Okay. Dr. James, I've already found the way out. After donating to the charity, I came back home to find my door open. I heard crashing noises and smelled a sharp, acrid smoke. Panicked, I rushed in. And then I saw Phoebe standing in my living room. Beside her were some of Daniel's friends who had once mocked me. My living room was covered in pictures of Harlan, all of them burned. Not a single one was left. You're back earlier than I thought. Phoebe stood there smugly, gleefully watching my heart break. I don't understand why, even though I've already stepped out of her and Daniel's lives, she can't let me go. She pulled out a photo from behind her. It was a family portrait taken when I was 15, with my stepfather and us together. I reached out to grab it, but she dodged. Rachel, unless you kneel and apologize to me. Back then, weren't you so arrogant? How dare you, a mere stand-in, hit me? Did you really think my words were just for show? Tears streamed down my face in large drops, and my whole body trembled. That was our only family photo. After it was taken, my parents passed away. When we became a family, my stepfather and Harlan treated me so well, always putting me first. They even said I had a unique kind of love in this family. Every day, my stepfather would bring me gifts when he came home, a skewer of candied fruit, a box of chocolates, or a cotton candy shaped like something cute. Before I turned 12, I lacked familial love, but this family gave it to me. I was no longer called a fatherless orphan. But heaven, perhaps thinking I was too happy, decided to take all of that away. When Harlan and I sorted through the belongings, we found my stepfather's memo that read, "Rachel wants the cake from that place in the south of town. After finishing things with the missus, remember to bring it home for her." He had even set a reminder alarm. But that alarm would never ring again. Sometimes, I really miss them. But they knew I was afraid of the dark and ghosts since I was a child, so they never once came to me in my dreams. Not even once. Phoebe, give me back the photo. I choked on my words, my tone pleading. She tore the family portrait to pieces, her voice dripping with venom. Daniel went home that day, completely out of it, muttering that you were using him as a stand-in. Staring at your photo on his phone, daydreaming, calling your name when drunk. You're just my stand-in. How dare you? I looked into it and found something amusing. Rachel, isn't it disgusting? You actually like your own brother. Disgusting? That word pierced me. She kept going. How could anyone like their brother? If you like him so much, why don't you just die? Copying me and finding a stand-in. How ridiculous. Why don't you just die? Those words echoed in my head, over and over. My hands were trembling. It felt like the blood in my veins had frozen solid. Harlan, would you despise me? Would you think I was filthy? How could I have found someone to replace you? I desecrated you. How am I even worthy of living? I don't deserve it. You wouldn't forgive me, would you? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the fruit knife on the coffee table. I walked toward it, numbly. Phoebe's scream stopped me in my tracks. What are you all standing there for? If she dies here, we'll all be implicated. Hands grabbed mine. I struggled desperately, tears blurring my vision. Let me go. Let me go. I have to atone for my sins. Hold her down. She can't get off this easily by just dying. In the scuffle, the necklace around my neck broke and fell to the ground. The necklace. Harlan was in that necklace. I couldn't lose it too. I bit down on their hands. They yelped in pain and let go of me. But as I rushed forward, Phoebe was already one step ahead of me. She stomped on it. It shattered. Shattered. My tears flowed uncontrollably as a deafening buzz filled my head. That was the last intact photo. Harlan, I'm so stupid, so useless. I couldn't even protect your things. I finally lost control. Rage consumed me as I slapped Phoebe across the face and grabbed her by the neck. How dare you? How could you touch my things? She coughed incessantly, her face turning red. Crazy. Rachel, let go, cough, cough. Let go? Would letting go bring back my photo? A surge of anger burned through my chest, making my grip tighten. Phoebe could no longer cough, her face turning a deep purple. But someone from behind pulled me away, saving her. Freed, Phoebe stood there, coughing nonstop. I ignored her and rushed to the fire to search for the photo. It was scorching hot. Glass shards from the floor pierced my legs. I didn't care, reaching into the flames to dig around. But as soon as I touched them, they turned to ash. Gone. Completely gone. When Daniel walked in, this was the scene he saw. I was kneeling amidst shattered glass, oblivious to the pain. My hands were red and swollen from the burns, still searching through the fire for something. He looked at the mess in the room, then rushed to me and held me tightly. Rachel, calm down. How could I calm down? I broke down crying. Why does it have to be like this? All my hopes, all of them, were gone. Let go. Let go of me. I tried to break free from Daniel's hold, struggling desperately in his arms. Tears fell one after another. My entire body trembled. Stop crying. Who is worth all this pain, huh? You've never cried for me. He held me close, his hand gently stroking my back. Rachel, you're always so strong, always so composed. Who could possibly make you cry like this? Please, stop crying. It hurts me to see you like this. Don't you know why she's crying? Daniel, you're just a substitute. Phoebe kicked the broken necklace at his feet. Daniel reached down to pick up the necklace Phoebe had stepped on. He saw the boy, who had similar features to him. His hand trembled uncontrollably. Daniel, look, she doesn't love you at all. Phoebe stormed right in front of him. Do you think he willingly stayed by your side for 5 years? It's because she uses you as a substitute. She has someone she likes. Stop talking. I don't want to hear it. Daniel growled at Phoebe, just leave, okay? Daniel, I'm the one who truly loves you. And you're yelling at me for that woman. Phoebe's voice broke with emotion. What's so great about her? Daniel, how could you do this to me? I've checked. That man is her brother. How disgusting is she, liking her own brother? Phoebe laughed crazily, her face twisted with a wild smile. But it's fine. Her brother's dead. He deserved it. Someone like her deserves to never be loved. Dead? Deserved it? In that instant, rage surged through me. No one has the right to say that about my Harlan, to speak ill of my brother. I don't know where the strength came from, but I broke free from Daniel's arms and spotted a fruit knife on the coffee table. I grabbed the knife and charged toward Phoebe. But unfortunately, Daniel blocked my way. The knife struck his shoulder. Then he took the knife from me and threw it far away. He pressed his hands down on my shoulders. Rachel, calm down. He's already dead. Even if you kill her, he won't come back to life. A buzzing sound filled my head. I covered my ears. Stop talking. Get out. Daniel's voice still reached my ears. Rachel, face the reality. He's dead. Holding on to this won't bring him back, it will just cause more pain. Let go of your obsession. Only then can you move on. I remembered Dr. James' words, when a long-time mental support disappears suddenly, it can cause serious problems. Rachel, once someone is dead, they can't come back. I felt something slowly slipping away from my body. I had nothing left. My parents were gone. Harlan was gone. Why am I still alive? Daniel was still saying something. But I couldn't hear him anymore. I just numbly watched the blood dripping from his arm. It was like the image of the first time I hurt myself. I started to feel dizzy. And then I saw Harlan again. I hid the scars on my wrist and waved to him. Are you here to take me? Brother, don't leave me this time, okay? I had a long dream. In the dream, Harlan came back. He was dressed in all black, leaning against a streetlight. Look, who's back? Your brother will never leave you. I rushed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He gently held me. Why are you crying? I'm still here. He softly patted my head, just like he did the day he left. Watching you live well, grow up, makes me happy. He told me that he had completed his mission, avenged our parents, and faked his death to escape. You've had a hard time all these years. He kissed my forehead. I shook my head. How could I have suffered as much as he did? Then, he took me to see our parents, speaking to the wind, you can rest now. Don't worry, this family still has someone here. Every word he said made tears stream down my face. Dad, Mom, you can come visit me in my dreams now. I have so many things to say to you. He wiped away my tears. The mission's done. I promised I'd come back and marry you. Will you still marry me? Yes. I will. But why did his face keep blurring? Why did his figure seem to grow more transparent? Harlan, don't go, please? I cried as I woke up, only to see Daniel sitting by my bed. He grabbed my hand. Had a nightmare? You were unconscious for 7 days. I'll call the doctor. He turned and left the room. I just stared blankly at the ceiling. It was just a dream. He didn't come to take me. Instead, the family doctor came, and Daniel locked me up in his villa on the outskirts of town. Rachel, you're not in a good state. I can't leave you alone like this. His version of taking care of me was to restrict my freedom, take away my phone, and cut off all contact with the outside world. Then, he imprisoned me. I stared at him blankly. Whatever he said, I wouldn't respond. He wasn't angry, though. He cut up fruit, fed me, and told me stories. I just quietly gazed out the window. I imagined Harlan might turn into an angel and wave at me from outside. Sometimes, when the weather was nice, Daniel would push me outside to sit in the sun. I didn't ask about that day. Because I was already planning my revenge. So, I refused to take medicine or go for any checks. I silently protested his confinement. Then one day, Daniel finally couldn't take it anymore. He took my hand and pressed it against his forehead, his voice hoarse. Rachel, please, just say something. Don't torture yourself. Torture myself? I didn't feel tortured. When I closed my eyes, I could see Harlan. When I woke up, I could imagine our life after marriage. Why would I talk to someone who didn't matter? Rachel, what's the point of this? He shouted. He's been dead for 5 years. Are you planning to live like this, half alive, forever? My ignoring him made Daniel angry. He released my hand and raised his voice. Rachel, we've been together for 5 years too. You tell me to let go, and I do. You tell me to leave, and I leave. How could you do this? Don't you have a heart? I shifted my gaze slightly and looked at him. You think I'm a substitute, and I don't have a heart. But what about you? Do you? Daniel, I don't understand you. What exactly do you mean by keeping me here? What's your purpose? He kicked a chair over. What do you think I'm doing here? You don't get it? I fell in love with you. Ridiculous, right? I fell in love with a substitute. That's how he felt it was unfair. Why was he falling for me, a substitute, but I couldn't love him? I stared at him silently. But I don't love you. Not even once. He stormed out of the room before I could finish. Daniel came back, acting as if nothing had happened, to feed me again. I've had your house redecorated. It's back to the way it was. Daniel had never been to my house. How could he have restored it? He handed me a tablet, and I glanced at it. The photo wall in the living room was back. The wall was filled with pictures. Of Daniel and me. In all these years, we never took any pictures together. So, they were photoshopped. I suddenly threw the tablet at him, trembling all over. How dare you touch my house? The edge of the tablet case grazed his old scar, and fresh blood began to seep out. He simply wiped it off, then stared at the broken tablet on the floor and smiled. Rachel, we have plenty of time, don't we? 1 year, 2 years won't do. 3, 5, 10 years, I've got time to wait. Daniel, are you crazy? Yes. You're crazy, and I'm crazy. We're a perfect match. He was insane. Look, you're getting emotional. I'm so happy. Rachel, you'll slowly forget everything, and then we can start over. He watched me with a twisted pleasure, admiring the way I reacted. Daniel, tell me, what exactly do you want? Tears streamed through my fingers. A wave of helplessness overwhelmed me. He smirked and reached out to wipe away my tears. You know what I want. I pulled away from his touch. What I want is your heart. My heart has long belonged to someone else. Rachel, this isn't fair. I thought I'd feel relieved after leaving you for Phoebe when she came back. But watching you walk away so decisively only left me restless. I took her to meet so many people, to revisit memories of her and me, but all I could think about was you. Without you in my life, I've been losing sleep every night. I looked into your Harlan and was driven mad with jealousy. How could a dead man claim all of you? He gently cupped my face. Rachel, this is who I am. I've fallen for you. So, you have to love me too. He was a lunatic. I closed my eyes, stayed silent for a long time, and then spoke slowly. Daniel, I'll focus on getting better. And I'll consider what you said. Hearing this, he hugged me, stroking my back softly. Rachel, you'll forget everything. Only then can we have a future. I reached out and hugged him back. Wait for me, okay? Okay. From that day on, I worked hard to cooperate with him on my recovery. I took the prescribed medicine. I underwent every necessary examination. I tried my best to appear as if I was slowly returning to normal. Tried to play along with Daniel's script of me gradually accepting him. He'd hold me on the couch to watch movies. He'd cook for me. He'd plan our wedding. Look, don't you think this designer's work is beautiful? I quietly looked at it and nodded. Yes, it's beautiful. I even played along, it suits me. He finally smiled with satisfaction. I'll arrange for the designer to come over and take your measurements sometime. I obediently nodded. All right. Rachel, I messed up the proposal last time. This time, I won't. Okay. Just like when I used to be a stand-in countless times before, I remained quiet, obedient, and agreeable. Occasionally, I'd throw a harmless tantrum to make it seem more realistic, wouldn't I? 2 months into being confined, I finally caught him letting his guard down. That day, Daniel came back drunk, holding me and murmuring, Rachel, will you ever understand why I did all this? I didn't respond. I gave him a glass of water laced with something, used his face to unlock his devices, and dismissed the guards stationed around the villa. Then I turned off my phone and threw it away. Finally, I tied him up securely to the bed. After that, I wrote an anonymous letter to the authorities, detailing the tax evasion and fraud his company had committed, supported by evidence I'd been collecting over the years. The cleaning staff only came every 2 days. By the time they discovered him, I would already have finished what I needed to do. Illegal confinement, tax evasion, he could enjoy his time in prison. As I left, Daniel murmured in his sleep, Rachel, can't you love me, just a little? I chuckled softly. Daniel, I don't love you. Not even a little. Then I grabbed my things and shut the door. I was finally free. I arranged for Phoebe to be abducted. If I had grievances, I'd settle them myself. She was tied up with her hands and feet bound behind her. I ripped the tape off her mouth. She immediately screamed, Rachel, you lunatic. What are you trying to do? Let me go, or you'll regret it. I slapped her hard across the face. Grabbing her by the collar, I dragged her to Harlan's grave and said, you destroyed the thing I loved most. So, I'll pay you back in kind. The desolate mountain was empty, with barely anyone passing by. Phoebe finally started to feel afraid, but she still put on a tough front. Rachel, you're insane. Why is it that even though we grew up together, in the end, he fell in love with you? We grew up side by side, and I was only gone for 5 years. What makes you better than me? I can't believe I became nothing more than a tool he used to make other women jealous. And he actually gave up on me for a slut like you. She laughed hysterically, then looked up at me with a fierce gaze. You orphan, you unwanted bastard. A jinx. Ha ha ha. You cursed your whole family to death. They were so unlucky to have you. I pulled out a fruit knife. Expressionless, I stabbed it into her foot. You crushed my necklace. She screamed in agony, her face contorting as she began to sob. You're crazy. A madwoman. I pinned her hand down and ground her fingers beneath the heel of my stiletto, pressing and twisting. You tore up my family photo and burned Harlan's pictures. She screamed in pain, Rachel, I'll kill you. I slapped her across the face again. She tried to say something more. I kept slapping her. I didn't stop until blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Until she stopped talking. She just glared at me with venomous eyes. I smiled faintly and slid the knife from her neck to her chest. I'd love nothing more than to kill you. She was too terrified to speak anymore. Imitating her tone from back then, I laughed too. Are you scared now? Now it's your turn to kneel and apologize to me. Weren't you so arrogant before? Tears filled Phoebe's eyes. She realized that someone as calmly unhinged as me was capable of anything. She broke down. She knelt on the ground, pressing her head into the dirt. I'm sorry. Please don't kill me. Her voice trembled, and she was overwhelmed with fear. I grabbed her by the collar and dragged her to Harlan's grave. Say it to him. Her once perfect makeup was long gone. Tears, dirt, and blood smeared across her face, leaving her utterly disheveled. She cried hoarsely, I'm sorry, Mr. Harlan, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. She had to feel as much pain as I did for it to count as an apology. I didn't stop her. She kept repeating it, over and over, until the sun rose. Until her voice gave out. I let her go. Not because I was kind. But because Harlan was a hero. I didn't want to leave even the slightest stain on his memory because of me. But after exhausting all my strength, I suddenly realized I was the stain. Silence returned to the surroundings. The mountain breeze was gentle, stirring the withered grass on the ground. It brushed through my hair. The mist on the distant peaks dissipated. Spring had come, birds were returning to their nests, waiting for you to come home with me. If you don't return, I'll come to you instead. I lay down in the grave I had already dug for myself. Beside me was a suicide note, don't investigate. It was my own decision. I'm sorry for troubling this world. As I swallowed the pills, the sunlight still shone warmly on my face. Before my consciousness faded, I finally saw Harlan's face clearly. In the past, it had always been blurry in my dreams. But this time it was vividly clear, just as I remembered him. He was forever young. I greedily stared at his features. I wanted to speak, but tears filled my eyes. I wanted to say, brother, are you mad at me for being disobedient, for not living well? I wanted to ask, Harlan, would you look down on me because I've had other boyfriends? I wanted to confess, you're so perfect, I don't deserve you. I'll walk this path alone. But when I opened my mouth, I couldn't say anything. Only sobs came out. He parted the mist and walked toward me step by step, gently ruffling my hair like he did the first time we met. His voice was clear, his smile pure. I'm here. These years must have been hard for you, haven't they? I promised to come and marry you. Tears streaming down my face, I gripped his hand tightly. Harlan, I'm finally reunited with you all. It feels so good. The end.